For over 90 years, Jamaica Producers has built a legacy of farming steeped in the rich soil and history of St. Mary, the grit of the Jamaican farmer, and the bold business sense of a few of our nation's forefathers. At JP Farms, our 360-acre banana farm produces over 5.5 million kilograms of fresh, ripe, and green bananas per year. And we have 70 acres of pineapples under cultivation, yielding over 1 million kilograms annually. We deliver these fruits to our fellow Jamaicans both here at home and abroad. We would not be able to do this without the ingenuity, integrity, and industriousness of the JP Farms technical and administration teams, which stand at the heart of the business. We are proud of our people, and we are proud to be part of a strong multinational company that is entirely Jamaican-owned. The resilience and togetherness shown across the island and in our own backyard in this time of crisis is nothing short of inspiring. We encourage you on behalf of the Jamaican farmers, if you're able to do so, to get some healthy, nutritious, fresh Jamaican produce today. Purchase from any Jamaican farmer and share it with your loved ones, especially the elderly and those in need. Stay healthy, stay safe, take care of one another. Thank you.
Oh yeah. What?
Be fresh, eat fresh. JP St. Mary's.
Kingston Wharves Limited. Professionalism, efficiency, and innovation. Delivering world-class service for over 70 years.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. You've been working, but you're flirting with the weekend. You can freak out. 1 in a million, you're a gem, shine when the light grows dim. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one.
We believe that given the right opportunity, everyone has a chance to be great.
It's not just the quantity of the food we produce, but the quality. It's not just the land or the planting of the seed, but the pride and joy of the nation we feed. Jamaica land we love is the value and standard to which we hold true.
We are JP St. Mary's, and we are fresh from the farm to you.
For over 90 years, Jamaica Producers has built a legacy of farming steeped in the rich soil and history of St. Mary, the grit of the Jamaican farmer, and the bold business sense of a few of our nation's forefathers. At JP Farms, our 360-acre banana farm produces over 5.5 million kilograms of fresh, ripe, and green bananas per year. And we have 70 acres of pineapples under cultivation, yielding over 1 million kilograms annually. We deliver these fruits to our fellow Jamaicans both here at home and abroad. We would not be able to do this without the ingenuity, integrity, and industriousness of the JP Farms technical and administration teams, which stand at the heart of the business. We are proud of our people, and we are proud to be part of a strong multinational company that is entirely Jamaican-owned. The resilience and togetherness shown across the island and in our own backyard in this time of crisis is nothing short of inspiring. We encourage you on behalf of the Jamaican farmers, if you're able to do so, to get some healthy, nutritious, fresh Jamaican produce today. Purchase from any Jamaican farmer and share it with your loved ones, especially the elderly and those in need. Stay healthy, stay safe, take care of one another. Thank you.
Oh yeah. What?
Be fresh, eat fresh. JP St. Mary's.
Kingston Wharves Limited. Professionalism, efficiency, and innovation. Delivering world-class service for over 70 years.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. You've been working, but you're flirting with the weekend. You can freak out. 1 in a million, you're a gem, shine when the light grows dim. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Charles Johnston, chairman of the company, and as such, I'll be chairman of this meeting. On behalf of the board of directors, I would like to welcome you to the 2020 annual general meeting of shareholders of Jamaica Producers Group Limited. This year, our AGM, for the first time in 83 years, has a different feel and a slightly different format. Rather than being closely surrounded by members of our board, our team, our shareholders and friends, the current circumstances have required us to distance ourselves from each other and to follow health and safety practices in conducting our meetings in the best interest of all our stakeholders. Some call this the new normal, We wish to assure our shareholders that although the format we are following today is somewhat different from our usual format, our meeting is legally compliant. Although we have made modifications to respond to the health risks posed by the pandemic, we are still having a physical meeting with our shareholders present. We are broadcasting our meeting for those who have chosen to remain at home, but still wish to view the AGM. With this in mind, I would like to specially welcome our shareholders and directors who ventured out to be present today and who willingly submitted themselves to temperature checks and sanitization to be here with us at a safe social distance. I would also like to acknowledge our shareholders and friends who are watching this meeting via live stream, since they were not able to be here, whether it was because they chose to take the extra precaution of not attending a gathering at this time, or because they were unable to leave home due to safety measures imposed by the government of Jamaica. I would also like to acknowledge the Board of Directors of Jamaica Producers Group. Most of our directors are connected to this meeting but are not here physically today, as they agreed that they would allow our shareholders' attendance to be a priority as we seek as a company to adhere to best practices in health and safety. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our company secretary and group general counsel, Ms. Simone Pearson, and ask that she confirm that the required quorum of 15 members present in person or by proxy has been met.
I confirm, Chairman.
I now call this meeting to order and invite Ms. Abigail Williams of JP Corporate to open in prayer.
Your mercies and grace. Teach us how to forgive as we ask for forgiveness. Our prayer today is that your will be done. We ask for your intervention and direction over the AGM proceedings. Dwell among us. Bless our directors, team members, and shareholders. Take what we have prepared and multiply our efforts as only you can. Give us renewed strength, patience, and understanding. Let your peace rain down on us today as we seek you now more than ever. As we depart today, be our guide and light, now and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Before we commence the business of the meeting, I would like to pay tribute to one of our longest-serving directors who passed away a few weeks ago, the Honorable Oliver Clark. Oliver became a director of Jamaica Producers Group in 1975. He left the board for 10 years in 1998 and rejoined Jamaica Producers in 2008. I would like to point out that although Oliver held directorships on many different boards, Jamaica Producers Group is the only board he left and then returned to. During his initial tenure with the board, Oliver formed a committee of one to recruit a managing director for producers in 1979. He did this very ably, as he recruited one of our longest-serving managing directors, Dr. Marshall Hall, who steered Jamaica Producers through the next 25 years of business. Oliver brought outstanding judgment, humility, and humor to our board, and was a consummate champion for the company and for our people. Jamaica Producers Group was only one among the many institutions that he touched and influenced for the good. We remain grateful for the tremendous contribution Oliver made to Jamaica Producers. The board and management of Jamaica Producers express our condolences to Oliver's family and friends. As a company, we will continue to honor his memory. May his soul rest in peace. It is also with sadness that I announce the passing of Captain Robert Hamati, a director and founder of the Tortuga business. Jamaica Producers is pleased to have had the opportunity to partner with Captain Hamati and his family to develop the Tortuga business in line with what became our shared goals. We are committed to the continued success of the Tortuga brand, which he embodied for so many years. May our friend and partner rest in peace. At this time, I'll ask that we observe a moment of silence in honor of our dear friends, Mr. Oliver Clark and Captain Robert Hamati. At this time, I'd like to ask for the reading of the auditor's report and introduce Mr. Nigel Chambers. I think most of you know Mr. Chambers very well. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning, shareholders, ladies and gentlemen. The auditor's report is in the annual report on page 48, starts on page 48. As usual, there are two parts of the report. There's a report on the audit of the consolidated financial statements and a report on additional requirements of the Jamaican Companies Act. Starting with the report on the financial statements, we have audited the consolidated financial statements of Jamaica Producers Group Limited, the company, and its subsidiary, collectively the group, set out on pages 55 to 111, which comprise the group balance sheet as at December 31, 2019, the group profit and loss account, statements of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, changes in equity and cash flows for the year then ended, and notes comprising significant accounting policies and other explanatory information. In our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements give a true and fair view of the financial position of the group as at December 31, 2019, and of its financial performance and its cash flows for the year then ended, in accordance with international financial reporting standards and the Jamaican Companies Act. We conducted our audit in accordance with international standards on auditing, or ISAs. Our responsibilities under those standards are further described in the auditor's responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements section of our report. We are independent of the group in accordance with International Ethics Standard Board of Accountants Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants, or the ISBA Code, and we have fulfilled our other ethical responsibilities in accordance with the ISBA Code. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. Key audit matters are those matters that in our professional judgment were of most significance in our audit of the consolidated financial statements of the current period. These matters were addressed in the context of the audit of the financial statements as a whole and in performing our opinion thereon, and we do not provide a separate opinion on these matters. There are two key audit matters. One is impairment of goodwill and intangible assets. The carrying value of the group's goodwill and intangible assets may not be recoverable due to changes in the business and economic environment in which specific subsidiaries operate. These factors create inherent uncertainty in forecasting and require significant judgment in estimating and discounting future cash flows that support the assessment of recoverability. See note 14 of the consolidated financial statements. In response, our audit procedures included testing the reasonableness of the group's forecasts and discounted cash flow calculations, including using our own valuation specialists to evaluate the assumptions and methodologies used by management, comparing the group's assumptions to externally derived data, as well as our own assessment of key inputs, such as projected economic growth, competition, cost inflation, and discount rates, as well as performing sensitivity analysis on the assumptions. Assessing the adequacy of the group's disclosures about the assumptions and the sensitivity of the impairment assessments to changes in key assumptions. Second matter relates to the valuation of employee benefit asset and obligations. A subsidiary operates a defined benefit retirement scheme and provides other unfunded retirement benefits. Significant estimates are made in valuing the group's employee benefit asset and obligations. The valuations are considered to be a significant risk, as given the value of assets and liabilities, small changes in the assumptions can have a material financial impact to the group. The key assumptions involved in calculating employee benefit asset and obligations are discount rates, inflation, and future increases in salaries and pensions. Management appointed an external actuarial expert in measuring the employee benefit asset and obligations at the reporting date. The use of significant assumptions increases the risk that management's estimate can be materially misstated, and there's more information in notes 4P and 18 to the financial statements. In response, our procedures included the following: evaluating the independence and objectivity of the appointed actuarial expert, determining that the actuarial valuation was performed in accordance with the requirements of IAS 19 employee benefits, testing employee data provided by management to the actuarial expert, assessing key assumptions used by the actuary, including inflation and discount rates, by comparing them to information from independent sources, confirming a selection of the plan assets with the custodians of the assets, and recomputing the fair values by reference to independent prices and yield curves. And lastly, assessing whether disclosures in the financial statements are appropriate in respect of the group's employee benefit arrangement. Management is responsible for the other information. The other information comprises the information in the company's annual report for the year ended December 31, 2019, but does not include the financial statements and our auditor's report thereon. The annual report is expected to be made available to us after the date of the auditor's report. In our opinion, our opinion on the financial statements does not cover the other information, and we do not express any form of assurance conclusion thereon. In connection with our audit of the financial statements, our responsibility is to read the other information identified above when it becomes available, and in doing so, consider whether the other information is materially inconsistent with the financial statements or our knowledge obtained in the audit, or otherwise appears to be materially misstated. When we read the annual report, if we conclude that there's a material misstatement therein, we are required to communicate the matter to those charged with governance. Management is responsible for the preparation of financial statements that give a true and fair view in accordance with IFRS and the Jamaican Companies Act, and for such internal control as management determines is necessary to enable the preparation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. In preparing the financial statements, management is responsible for assessing the company's ability to continue as a going concern, disclosing as applicable matters related to going concern, and using the going concern basis of accounting unless management either intends to liquidate the company or to cease operations or has no realistic alternative but to do so. Those charged with governance are responsible for overseeing the group's financial reporting process. Our objectives are to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, and to issue an auditor's report that includes our opinion. Reasonable assurance is a high level of assurance, but is not a guarantee that an audit conducted in accordance with ISAs will always detect a material misstatement when it exists. Misstatements can arise from fraud or error and are considered material if individually or in the aggregate they could reasonably be expected to influence the economic decisions of users taken on the basis of these financial statements. A further description of our responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements is included in the appendix to this auditor's report, and this description, which is located on pages 53 and 54, forms part of the auditor's report. I'll come back to the appendix, but the report on additional matters as required by the Jamaican Companies Act, we have obtained all the information and explanations which, to the best of our knowledge and belief, were necessary for the purposes of our audit. In our opinion, proper accounting records have been maintained so far as appears from our examination of those records, and the financial statements which are in agreement therewith give the information required by the Jamaican Companies Act in the manner required. And the engagement partner on the audit resulting in this independent auditor's report is Nigel Chambers. The report is signed by KPMG Chartered Accountants on February 28, 2020. And I'll just run through the appendix, which starts on page 53. As part of an audit in accordance with ISAs, we exercise professional judgment and maintain professional skepticism throughout the audit. We also identify and assess the risks of material misstatement of the financial statements, whether due to fraud or error, design and perform audit procedures responsive to those risks, and obtain audit evidence that is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. The risk of not detecting a material misstatement resulting from fraud is higher than for one resulting from error, as fraud may involve collusion, forgery, intentional omissions, misrepresentations, or the override of internal control. We also obtain an understanding of internal controls relevant to the audit in order to design audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the group's internal control. Evaluate the appropriateness of accounting policies used and the reasonableness of accounting estimates and related disclosures made by management. Conclude on the appropriateness of management's use of the going concern basis of accounting, and based on the audit evidence obtained, whether a material uncertainty related to events or conditions that may cast significant doubt on the company's ability to continue as a going concern. If we conclude that a material uncertainty exists, we are required to draw attention in our auditor's report to the related disclosures in the financial statements, or if such disclosures are inadequate, to modify our opinion. Our conclusions are based on the audit evidence obtained up to the date of our auditor's report. However, future events or conditions may cause the company to cease to continue as a going concern. We evaluate the overall presentation, structure, and content of the financial statements, including the disclosures, and whether the financial statements represent the underlying transactions and events in a manner that achieves fair presentation. And lastly, we obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding the financial information of the entities or business activities within the group to express an opinion on the consolidated financial statements. We are responsible for the direction, supervision, and performance of the group audit. We remain solely responsible for our audit opinion. We communicate with those charged with governance regarding, among other matters, the planned scope and timing of the audit and significant audit findings, including any significant deficiencies in internal control that we identify during our audit. We also provide those charged with governance with a statement that we have complied with relevant ethical requirements regarding independence, and communicate with them all relationships and other matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on our independence, and where applicable, related safeguards. From matters communicated with those charged with governance, we determined those matters that were of the most significance in the audit of the financial statements of the current period and are therefore the key audit matters. We describe these matters in our auditor's report unless law or regulation precludes public disclosure about the matters, or when in extremely rare circumstances, we determine that the matter should not be communicated in our report because the adverse consequences of doing so would reasonably be expected to outweigh the public interest benefits of such communication. And that's the end of the report. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers, for that lengthy report. And I would urge you to continue to lobby the government to change this requirement going forward. The notice convening the meeting, to be found in the annual report, has been circulated to members, and I now propose that we take this notice as having been read. I wish to inform you that proxies to be exercised at the meeting must have been lodged with the company at least 48 hours before the meeting. We received 23 proxies, representing 25% of the issued stock of the company. I also take the opportunity to inform you that the share register and articles of incorporation are available for inspection by members. A copy of the minutes of the last AGM are available for inspection and were also published on our website. I must remind members that only registered shareholders or their appointed proxies or representatives can move or second motions, ask questions, and vote. Further, for recording purposes, I request that anyone speaking at this meeting state his or her name. At this point, I'd like to reintroduce the directors of the Board of Jamaica Producers, with whom most of you will be familiar. Firstly, Mr. Jeffrey Hall, who also serves as Chief Executive Officer of your company. Mr. Alan Buckland, who is also our Group Finance Director, Mrs. Patricia Francis, Mrs. Sanya Goff, Dr. Marshall Hall, Mrs. Delia Kelly, Mrs. Kathleen Moss, who is attending here, Mr. Donovan Perkins, Mr. Grantley Stevenson, and Professor Alvin Wint. I would also like to acknowledge the following officers of the company. From JP Corporate, Mr. Andrew White, Group Treasurer. Mrs. Maya Johnston, Chief Commercial Officer, and Mrs. Maya Johnston just recently joined us and this group. Mrs. Tanika White Groves, Corporate Financial Controller. From Kingston Wharves Limited, Mr. Mark Williams, Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Clover Moody, Group Chief Financial Officer. From JP Tropical Foods Group, Mr. David Martin, Managing Director, Ms. Antoinette Livingston, Group Financial Controller, Mr. Mario Figueroa, Farm Manager, JP Farms, Ms. Peta Gay York, Finance Business Partner, JP Farms, Mr. Benjamin Valdez, or Benjamin Valdez, General Manager, JP Snacks, Mrs. Nuris Castillo, Finance Business Partner, JP Snacks, Mr. Marcus Simmons, General Manager, Tortuga, and Ms. Camille Lawson, Finance Business Partner, Tortuga. From Ale Hugesteger, Fresh Specialist, BV, in Holland, Mr. Edo Abels, Managing Director, Mr. Marco Zoland, Deputy Managing Director and Financial Controller. From JP Shipping Services Limited in the UK, Mr. Robert Smith, General Manager, Mr. John Davies, Financial Controller. And from Sage Group Limited, Mr. Trevor Riley, Chief Executive Officer. We have already introduced Mr. Nigel Chambers, but I'll do it again. Chairman's remarks. Shareholders, Jamaica Producers Group Limited has long been organized to generate revenues from both a diverse range of business lines and, importantly, a diverse range of markets. We view the diversity of our business as a strength. In addition to providing some resilience to our operating income, it also positions us to consider business development and acquisition opportunities in a wide range of markets. We are fortunate to have the expertise, capital, and liquid assets to effectively consider a broad range of growth and investment possibilities while, at the same time, managing through very significant medium-term challenges brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. Shareholders, today the workforce of Jamaica Producers and its associated companies numbers over 1,500 persons. I would like to thank each of them for their valuable contribution to the 2019 result. I also thank our customers for their continued loyalty and support, and our board and management for their counsel and leadership during the year. I now invite Mr. Jeffrey Hall to make a presentation on the performance for the year 2019 and the outlook for 2020.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin the management report, Chairman, I would like to make two quick points. First, I would like to thank you and the board for your guidance and support during the year, especially at this time. The governance of this company is very important to our performance, and at JP, we do this well. The second point has to do with something that shareholders viewing us might have already noticed. Typically, every year at this time, we all dig out our business suits. But this year, we just did not think it was right to continue to present ourselves to you as shareholders as suit and tie people. The truth is that everything we do, every business that we operate, everywhere in the world, is deemed to be an essential service in the environments in which we conduct business. And this year we felt duty-bound to change our dress code slightly as a small gesture to show solidarity with our frontline workers all over the world. They are who we are at Jamaica Producers. None of what we really do as a company, whether it be sourcing fruit from Egypt or Spain or South Africa to make juice for Scandinavia or Germany or Belgium or the Netherlands, or peeling plantain or cassava and banana to produce snacks, or making Tortuga rum cake in Jamaica for sale to Costco in Texas in time for their Father's Day promotion, or discharging a car ship with 2,000 cars, or manning cranes to unload grain or containers of consumer goods, or clearing a barrel of personal effects from London, or harvesting bananas and pineapples in St. Mary and making them available every single day without fail on the roadside and halfway tree or in supermarkets across Jamaica. None of that, Mr. Chairman, can be done by a Zoom call. And all of it is extremely valuable to us as shareholders and to the communities in which we do business. So I want to begin by associating myself firmly with the frontline workers everywhere and with those of Jamaica Producers Group in particular, and to thank them and salute them for their courage and dedication at this time. Chairman, I have 3 agenda items that I wanted to share with you and with shareholders. First, quick overview of JP today. Secondly, our performance during 2019, and then a little bit on the outlook going forward. So as we've articulated in our annual report, we have 2 broad strategic objectives. The first is to build a diversified specialty food and drink group. And the second is to develop world-class logistics infrastructure for the Caribbean. We operate with approximately 1,000 employees, full-time, full year, and 1,600 employees if you include contract employees that are come on board during peak times or that have a variable compensation structure. Of that group, roughly half are in Jamaica, roughly a quarter are in Europe, and roughly a quarter are elsewhere in the Americas. Let's look at our business by geography. Again, roughly half of the business is in Jamaica, with around 40% in Europe and around 10% elsewhere in the Caribbean. But of that 100%, approximately 85% of that book of business generates its income, its revenue, in hard currency or in foreign exchange or non-Jamaican dollars. And that revenue by segment is approximately 55% in the food and drink business and 45% in our logistics and infrastructure operations. Looking back over a 10-year span, we've done very well. Our group revenues have grown on average by about 15% per year, and our shareholders' equity has compounded at a rate of approximately 12% per annum over the last 10-year period. Many of you will be concerned or interested in our COVID response program. And what we've done is we've identified 4 phases of response to COVID. And we've given them names and created a program that's measurable around our group to assess our performance for each phase of the program. The first phase we call Avoid, and that phase has to do with making sure that our employees and our key stakeholders are safe, that they're not infected by COVID. So hand sanitizers, social distancing, face masks, other separators in business have been very important to that program. The second phase we call Adapt, and that is the period in which our businesses were operating under significant lockdowns. How do we operate in that environment? How do we remain resilient? How do we utilize e-commerce to fulfill our requirements where possible? And so operating within a lockdown has a special set of requirements that we've had to fulfill. With the opening of borders slowly in many of the places in which we do business, we're now transitioning to what we call the restore phase. And that phase is a phase in which we see ourselves operating not as constrained by lockdowns, but facing what may well be a prolonged economic downturn. For those of us who operate in the Jamaican environment and those businesses, I can be a bit more specific. The IMF, as well as the IDB have given, and the government of Jamaica have given estimates of the GDP reduction for this year at about 5.3%, which is a very significant economic impact. There has not been a year in which we faced that level of economic downturn since the 1970s. So it's a bigger impact than the FinSAC era, and a bigger impact than the 2008 meltdown on Jamaica. We also have identified a foreign exchange gap as a country, approximately 1.1 billion, 1.2 billion, as estimated by the central bank and the IMF. We have to operate in that environment. A lot of this stems from the transmission of the closure of the tourism industry on Jamaica, and as we know, tourism represents about 10% of our direct GDP and about 30% including indirect GDP. So what we've had to do is to organize our business to perform well in the context of an economic downturn and economic uncertainty. And I'll share a bit about that going forward. The fourth element of our business planning is what we call the reinvent phase. And for us, that means making sure that Jamaica Producers Group and its businesses remain relevant in what will become the new normal or the post-COVID environment. And I'll share a little bit about that going forward. In terms of immediate priorities, we believe we've performed very well. We've prioritized the sustainability of our essential services. We've maintained all of our business lines without disruption thus far. We've enhanced the communication with our teams. We've maintained a priority on open communication, transparency, and being forthright about the concerns that affect our businesses. And we've supported our communication with technology. We've reduced on-site staff to a minimum where required and put in place all of the measures necessary to keep people safe when on-site. In some of our markets, the government has provided public support for employees, and where possible, we've made efforts to take advantage of those insofar as they support our employees and minimize the disruption of our business. We've refocused our resources on those markets that are accessible, using direct selling, using e-commerce, using the essential services channels of supermarkets. And we've embraced a corporate social responsibility to staff and to the communities in which we do business. Being compassionate is also an important part of the priorities that we've set for ourselves. And so in Jamaica, just to give some highlights, even though we've done initiatives in every country in which we do business, we were participants both directly and through Kingston Wharves in financing the ventilators for Jamaica. We identified the zones in Jamaica that faced more significant lockdowns, which people could not access retail channels, and we arranged directly and with the police force to bring food to them. And we're very proud of the work that we did at those times, and we'll continue to do it. Let's now pivot to a discussion about our performance in 2019, and I'll just give you a few specific highlights. Our gross revenues were 21.5 billion, up almost 10% over the prior year. That revenue growth has been significant because it's flowed straight through to the bottom line, and we've generated an increase in profit before tax at a consolidated level of 41%, and net profit attributable to JP shareholders of an increase of 47% year over year, from just under $1 billion to 1.2 billion in 2019. So with significant revenue growth of 9.4%, we were able to deliver even more significant profit growth. And for us, this means making sure that we take advantage of our installed base of fixed capacity to deliver returns for shareholders. The return on equity was 8.7% for the year. Let's look at it by divisions. As I mentioned before, we operate two divisions, the food and drink business and the logistics and infrastructure. Let's take food and drink first. Revenues grew by 11%, and we were able to double profits during the year. Again, this resulted from increased revenues, with revenue growth both in Europe and in the Caribbean, and with the majority of the earnings growth coming from the Caribbean food business, which had significant expansion in its international sales. Our European business also had sales growth of 22%, and this came from expanded capacity, a new innovation, and new markets across Europe in our food and drink juice lines. One of the things that we did during the year, just to give you some highlights, in our Tortuga business, and this is serving us very well right now, is we looked at trends in the US and identified opportunities to sell not just in the travel retail market, which are the core channel for Tortuga, but direct through what are called big box stores, such as Costco and other stores in the US. And what we determined is that there's a desire, yes, for rum cake, but also for other types of spirit cakes. And so this year we introduced the Tortuga Kentucky Bourbon Cake. It's doing very well. It's listed in the southeast of the United States and the southwest, and is beginning to show significant growth. This is supported through big box channels as well as through e-commerce. In the Caribbean, in our snack business, we sought during 2019 to improve our distribution and entered into a joint venture with Wisinco, and that is allowing us to expand our product range. During the year, we introduced banana bread, and we expect to continue to do range extensions in Jamaica towards the end of summer, and to use our distribution platform joint venture relationship with Wisinco to expand that business. In Europe, as I mentioned, we are now seen as the market leader in fresh juice, and we've deployed technology to ensure that while we retain the freshness of our juice, we're able to maintain its shelf life. In addition, we're developing a wide range of juices beyond traditional OJ and apple juice. We have vegetable juices, kale, spinach, avocado, etc., and we're exactly on point with the mega trends in Europe around health, and we believe that will serve us particularly well at this time. Let's talk a little bit about logistics and infrastructure. Again, we're very pleased to deliver revenue growth in that business of 7% and bottom line growth of a higher number, in this case, 20%. One of the things that we experienced in 2019 was significant growth in our logistics activities. We have developed warehousing and logistics operations, as well as car logistics services, in which we provide a service to the entire region through Kingston Wharves. That did very well for us during the year. We also expanded our logistics operations in the UK, where we doubled the size of our UK logistics facility. As I mentioned to you before, The business that we're in Kingston Wharves sees large car vessels coming from the Far East and from other places in which cars are manufactured, coming to Jamaica and using our terminal as a facility to store and to inspect motor vehicles before they are transshipped to 30 jurisdictions across the world within the region as well as far as Australasia. In the UK, we receive less than container load goods, have a full service warehouse operation, and supply all countries in the English-speaking Caribbean, and that did well for us during the year. From a group perspective, we saw a 10% increase in total assets. We're very pleased to have a strong cash position. Cash and short-term investments are now at $7.1 billion. JP shareholders' net worth, as at year end, was just over 100 million US and grew by 14.3% year over year. From an investor standpoint, very pleased to say that we've grown dividends over the last 5 years with a compound annual growth rate of over 20%, and our market capitalization over the 5-year period has grown from just under $6 billion to $30 billion. So we perform very well from an investor standpoint on the back of the performance identified within our core business. Outlook. We're operating obviously in the context of COVID, and we believe that that context will continue for the year ahead. Our Q1 numbers were impacted by COVID in the Caribbean, or in Jamaica in particular, commencing on March 10th. So we'd have had 2 to 3 weeks within a period affected by lockdowns and travel restrictions. Our business in Europe would have seen an earlier impact because the impact in the Netherlands and in Northern Europe came prior to Jamaica. So as a result of that, we incurred costs to maintain our supply chain effectiveness. We did see revenue growth, primarily in the first few months prior to the more direct and significant impact of COVID. But as a consequence of COVID, in the latter part of the quarter, the last 3 weeks of the quarter, we did face a slight reduction in earnings of 4%, primarily as a result of cost increases necessary to maintain the supply chain, as well as sales challenges in the latter part of the quarter. From an outlook perspective, I want to say the following things, shareholders. Number one is that JP benefits from the investments that we've made over the years to maintain geographic diversity and product line diversity. This will be a strength that will serve us well, we believe. No more than 50% of our revenues is in any one country. 85% of our revenues are denominated in hard currencies. We have well invested and efficient facilities, so we're competitive in every business in which we operate. We have a strong and liquid balance sheet. And we believe that we have a resilient structure. We believe that and our priorities at this moment are to pursue our e-commerce prospects, particularly in our packaged foods businesses, to take best advantage of the healthy eating trends that we're seeing in Europe. Where we have businesses that benefit from supermarket sales channels, we'll optimize those opportunities. We'll maintain our global supply chain and logistics to ensure not only that we provide the logistics service, but that our businesses benefit from our logistics capabilities and continue to have raw materials and are able to address customer and consumer demands. We're pleased that our businesses continue to be identified as essential services, so we're able to operate. Of course, this implies, however, that we have to be particularly careful as we do business about maintaining the health and safety of our team. I also want to emphasize that we see this moment for JP as an opportunity to expand. We believe that this moment will present acquisition opportunities, We believe that the diversity of our business and the strength of our balance sheet and the prospects for synergies that spread overheads across a larger base will put us in a very strong position to identify and acquire other businesses. And so this is an important part of our focus for the remainder of the year. Chairman, that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for that very positive presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, we're now coming to the questions and answers. We had invited our shareholders who chose to stay at home to submit their questions to us ahead of the meeting. Some of our shareholders have submitted questions, and I will start with those questions. And then after that, I will invite questions from the shareholders who are present. I remind those who are present to state their names for the record. So I'll now ask the Company Secretary to read the questions which were submitted one by one, and we will answer them one by one.
Chairman, our shareholder, Mr. Oret Staple, submitted 5 questions before the meeting. He also sent in some comments. So I'll start by reading his comments, and then I will go on to take each question one at a time. Let us all give God thanks for guiding and guarding us through 2019 to this day of our annual general meeting. Let us give Creator God thanks for his many blessings despite the many challenges we face each day. We all ask you, Lord, to be in our midst today and help us to deliberate the business of our group in a fair and equitable manner. At the end of this meeting, we ask you, Lord, to take us back safely to our various abodes. This we all ask in Jesus' name, amen. Chairman, the first question is on page 50 of the auditor's report. Mr. Chairman, through you to our auditor, why is it that significant assumptions would increase the risk that management's estimates could be materially misstated? Would this relate to the numbers presented here today?
Nigel.
Sure, Chair. And as the shareholder mentioned, this is in relation to the second key audit matter on page 50. So first of all, this is in relation to a defined benefit scheme. And that means that the benefits are determined based on people's salaries at or around the time that they retire. And the benefits continue for the lifetime of the then retired employee or pensioner. So because the benefits have to be estimated as at December 31, which is substantially, long before people actually get to retirement, you have to make assumptions, for instance, around what their salaries will be in, let's say, 20 years' time when they do retire. You have to make assumptions around, how long the pensioner survives after retirement, etc. So if you take, for instance, the inflation number, and somebody retires in 20 years' time, you have to now multiply their current salary 20 times by the inflation rate to estimate what that number would be when they do retire. And similarly, the discount rate, you have to discount all the way from retirement or for the life of the pensioner back to December 31. So if you change any of those variables by a small number, it creates a significant impact. And therefore, that's a risk associated with it, that it's multiplication, so it compounds. So obviously, we respond in the audit approach, I set out on page 50, by looking at those assumptions and making sure that as far as possible, they're one, based on independent sources, and secondly, they're reasonable. So that's the risk and the response.
Thank you, Nigel. The next question.
Question 2 is regarding for pages 6 and 59 of the auditor's report. Mr. Chairman, as at December 31st, 2019, the group reported accumulated returned earnings of 11,641,603. For the same period, you only paid out dividends of 168,322 million. Please explain why dividends paid out to stockholders, inclusive of yourself, remain so small, while you boast of increased dividends.
Well, I don't think the word boast is correct, but the fact is we constantly review our annual dividend payments against future cash requirements, including most significantly the continuing investment the group needs to make in financing the growth of the company. However, the total dividend payments increased by 25% from 2018 to 2019. And in the 5 years since 2014, dividend payments have increased nearly 5 times. That said, we are committed to continuing the growth of our dividends going forward. However, we might have hit with COVID this year. I think everybody has hit a roadblock. So we will, but because we have such a strong balance sheet, we now are able to cope with what is happening.
Question 3, and this is on page 98 of the financial statements. Mr. Chairman, explain why you spent $307,153,000 to earn $234,137,000. Why did you measure this using amortized cost?
So, Alan Buckland, our financial director, and he is attending this meeting from Wales. So, Alan, would you like to answer this question?
Certainly, Chair. The two on page 98 are not directly related. So let me explain. The 307 million relates to financial expenses, specifically interest incurred on borrowings. Now that 307 million, as you can see, has fallen down by 60 million since the prior year. And that relates to the group debt. Total group debt has declined, but also our interest rate on that debt has declined at the same time. The 234 million relates to finance income, and that is specifically predominantly interest income earned on our cash and treasury holdings. Now, the group holds significant cash reserves in order to fund potential capital expenditure, working capital, and also to remain prepared for eventualities such as what we're experiencing now. This income represents the interest on this cash balance. I think that probably answers the question. The reference to amortized cost is simply how we book or how we record the interest expense for the purposes of accounting, which for us is fairly straightforward. We can record it as it falls due.
Thank you, Alan. So essentially, there are two different things. Simone, next question.
Question number 4. This is on page 97 of the financial statements. Mr. Chairman, explain what accounted for this significant increase of management remuneration from $87,291,000 to $122,597,000, 40.4%. This relates to the executive member on the board.
Two factors account for the increase in this amount. Firstly, the full year effect of an additional executive director who was appointed to the board midway through 2018. Secondly, the compensation of our executive directors has a large portion of variable bonus that is linked to the profitability of the group. So you will notice that the group made a significant increase in profits between 2018 and 2019. With the group's earnings increasing by 48% against 2018, this variable bonus has increased as well. So, and unfortunately, both the profits and this bonus will be reduced in 2020 because of this coronavirus. So sometimes what goes up also comes down. But we find that the variable bonus is a very good system for executive management.
Chairman, the final question from Mr. Staple is on page 111 of the financial statements. Mr. Chairman, Kingston Wharves Limited is a subsidiary company of Jamaica Producers Group. This subsidiary was designated as a developer of a special economic zone. From all indications, as a developer, you may face concerns with warehousing facilities which may not be fully used or may be closed due to COVID. Your thoughts on this?
Jeffrey, would you like to respond to this?
Yes, Chairman. First of all, let me thank Mr. Staple for taking the time to ask these questions and for being present with us. We miss you in person, Mr. Staple, but we know you're out there somewhere paying close attention. As far as Kingston Wharves, so let's be specific. During the course of 2019, we would have acquired approximately 150,000 square feet of incremental warehousing real estate. In one case, through a company in which we ended the year with 100%, and then in the other case, through a direct purchase. And we also announced plans for development of a further set of warehousing facilities off dock, but very much in the area of Newport West. The position of Kingston Wharves on the matter is twofold. The first view is that we believe that the location is strategic for two reasons. Reason number one is that we've sought to make applications for special economic zone status for our properties. And reason number two is that they're close to the terminal. And we believe that port-centric logistics has growth potential. The second thing that we do is we make sure that our acquisitions and our real estate developments are demand-led. And by that I mean that before breaking ground or making an acquisition, we've typically identified a potential user for some or all of the facility. So with that, I do believe that we can prudently manage our occupancy rates and the returns from our warehousing through the COVID environment.
Thank you, Mr. Staple, for those questions. And I now open up the questions to other shareholders who are here. And we have one question from Mr. Edward Isaacs.
In 2018, some money was granted to shareholders, and up to now I don't get anything out of it. And I asked him the them, and them telling me that it is at course and get it up to now. So I think about that, sir, and I even asked you about it, Johnson.
One moment,
and up to now I can't get to hear anything about it, sir.
Mr. Edward Isaacs, can you unmask and ask the question again, please? I've not been able to hear you clearly.
In 2018, someone was granted what I asked at the meeting, and up to now I don't get any out of it. And when I go to the auditors, them tell them send it to the post office, and up to now I'm not getting money. And I went to your office and tell you about it, and you say my number at the gate. I know I don't hear anything, and all last year and the year before, them don't send anything to me. It's the first I'm coming back here.
First of all, I do remember you coming to me at the end of a meeting.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me say what I'm saying.
I come down to your office. I come to your office and talk to you about it.
I do remember you. I do remember you coming, and I put you on to the company secretary and the registrar of shares. However, I am disappointed that you have not been satisfied and your matter has not been resolved. So I undertake here now to have your matter resolved 100% within 2 weeks of this meeting.
Yes, sir.
So that I have.
No,
and I've said it publicly, and I'm going to make sure it is resolved within 2 weeks.
All right, sir. But the dividend has to get 1 in 4. What happened to it? It's not going again. It's over 12 years now. I don't get a 1 in 4 per my dividend.
Oh,
I was sick and I didn't come and meet for a long time.
The stock split you're talking about, well, you know, that is something that directors decide from time to time.
That is something different to talk about.
Yes, I know. I'm saying that is something that the directors...
Last time I come to meet in 2018, I didn't want to talk to you about it. But when I look in for you and I didn't see Uncle Jeffrey, and him say I should keep a check, and him look, but I don't hear nothing from that.
Well, let me say to you that the stock split or bonus shares is something that we decide upon from time to time. We have not had a recent one, and it's not a regular thing that is done. However, the first item you talked about, which is, I take it, dividends that are due to you, which you have not received, as I said, I will undertake within 2 weeks to resolve that matter for you, because it is long overdue.
Yes, sir. But I don't get anything for this year neither, sir. Okay.
Mr. Isaacs, I promise you within 2 weeks it is resolved.
All right, sir. Good.
Thank you. Any more questions from the shareholders? So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your comments, your observations, and questions. We have endeavored to answer your questions and trust that we have done this to your satisfaction. I would now wish to proceed to the consideration of the resolutions before us. The accounts and the reports of the directors and auditors have been circulated previously to all members, and Mr. Nigel Chambers of KPMG has read the auditor's report, which may be found on pages 48 to 54 of the annual report. I now ask that the director's report, which may be found on page 24 of the annual report, be taken as read, and thank you for so agreeing. Ordinary Resolution Number 1. To receive and consider the Director's Report, Auditor's Reports, and audited financial statements for the company and the group for the year ended December 31st, 2019. I now ask our Secretary to read the first resolution before the meeting.
That the Director's Report, Auditor's Reports, and audited financial statements of the company and group for the year ended December 31st, 2019 be and are hereby adopted.
May I now have a proposal? So proposed, Chairman. Mrs. Kathy Moss, and a seconder, Simone Pearson, seconds. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All those against the motion, please raise your left hand. I declare the motion carried. Ordinary Resolution Number 2, to fix the remuneration of the auditors for 2019, or to determine the manner in which such remuneration is to be fixed. I now ask our Secretary to read the second resolution before the meeting.
That the remuneration of the auditors, KPMG, having been fixed by the directors for 2019, be and is hereby adopted.
May I now have a proposal? So, Mrs. Moss moves, and the seconder, is there, Mr. Isaacs, was that you raising your hand there? Or did somebody behind Mr. Isaacs? I need a name from the floor. Mr. Isaacs, second. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All those against the motion, please raise your right hand. I declare the motion carried. Ordinary Resolution Number 3. To ratify interim capital distributions and declare them final. And then we'll ask our Secretary to read the third resolution before the meeting.
That the interim capital distribution of 15 cents per stock unit of record date December 20th, 2019 be and is hereby ratified and declared final for 2019.
May I now have a proposal? Mr. Jeffrey Hall proposes and Mrs. Kathy Moss seconds. All those in favor of this, please raise your right hand. All those against the motion now, please raise your right hand. One person against it. I declare the motion carried by majority. Ordinary resolution number 4, reappointment of auditors. Simone?
That the auditors, KPMG, having indicated their willingness to continue in office, be and are hereby reappointed for the year 2021.
Could I have somebody to propose that, please? Mrs. Pearson moves this, and sorry, who is it? Mr. Martin. And Mr. Martin seconds. All those in favor of the motion? All those against the motion, please raise their right hand. The motion is carried unanimously. Ordinary resolution number 5, election and rotation of directors. The directors retiring from office pursuant to Articles 78 to 80 of the company's Articles of Incorporation are Mrs. Patricia Francis and Professor Alvin Wint. Both of the retiring directors, being eligible, offer themselves for re-election.
That Mrs. Patricia Francis, who retires by rotation, be and is hereby re-elected a director of the company.
I'd like to propose for Mr. Jeffrey Hall and Mrs. Moss seconds. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hands. All those against the motion, please raise your right hand. I declare the motion carried unanimously.
That Professor Alvin Wint, who retires by rotation, be and is hereby re-elected a director of the company.
May I now have a proposal? Mr. Jeffrey Hall, Mrs. Cassie Moss, all in favor? All those against the motion, please raise your right hand. The motion is carried unanimously. Ordinary resolution number 6. I now ask our secretary to read the 6th resolution before the meeting, which concerns remuneration of the directors. Please note that the directors' fees for 2019 are indicated on page 97 of the annual report, and those fees totaled $14,130,000. Simone?
That the amount, $14,130,000, shown in the accounts for the year ended December 31st, 2019, for non-executive directors' fees, be and is hereby approved.
Can I have somebody to propose this? Mr. David Martin, and a seconder? Gentlemen, Mr. Omari. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All those against the motion, please raise your right hand. I declare the motion carried unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the formal business of the annual meeting. I would really like to thank you all for attending and for your continued confidence and support, which is so necessary for our success. May I also on your behalf, express thanks again to our directors, to the management and staff who have all worked extremely hard to successfully deal with the challenges experienced during the year. And as you can see from last year's results, as well as the first quarter of 2020, the company is gradually being placed in a stronger position. Well, I must say that we are in the middle of the COVID. We don't know where it is going to go. I think our government has acted very positively and strongly in this matter. Jamaica has not had a lot of cases, and we hope that this continues when we open up the economy. But I think that our company has also acted very strongly and very positively. And I'd like to thank the management for the efforts that they've made in this regard. We will continue to watch it closely, and we will be at the forefront of following what the health guidelines are in this country, and in Europe, and in other countries that we operate. I now declare this meeting closed, and thank you for coming and for being part of a historic meeting held during the time of the pandemic, a time which we will certainly not forget. We wish you well and hope that you will continue to keep safe and healthy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman. Very good.